Hello again, math students. I'm going to try to keep this lesson a little shorter than the last one. I know the last one was kind of long. But would you please take out your orange sheet, because we're going to fill in the perfect cubes and cube roots on that sheet. And again, have a calculator handy if you want to double check any of these numbers. So at the bottom of that orange sheet, we've got these 10 numbers. I did mention in the last lesson, I usually do this as a time test. Usually I only would ask you to do like 1 through 5 cubed and the cube roots of those. 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10, those are really helpful for when we're just using it to find numbers for your worksheets, for instance. So I want you to have these handy. Now remember, when I'm multiplying or when I'm cubing something, I am really multiplying it times itself 3 times. Now again, 1 squared and 1 cubed, same thing, because 1 cubed is 1 times 1 times 1, that's 1. The cube root of 1 is also just 1. 2 cubed is 8, because 2 times 2 is 4 times 2 is 8. So the cube root of 8 is 2. Same thing as last time. If you need to pause this, go ahead and do that. 3 cubed is 27. So the cube root of 27 is 3. 4 cubed is 64. So the cube root of 64 is 4. I will say that 64 gives some students a lot of trouble because 64 is both a perfect square, that's 8 squared, and a perfect cube, 4 cubed. So you have to be really careful on this. And let me do this last one, then I want to mention one other thing. 5 cubed is 125. So the cube root of 125 is 5. Now I should say this, I should have said this right away, but you can see that obviously I've got a 3 for an exponent. This little 3 right here in that index spot, that's what tells me that it's a cube root instead of just a square root. So I'm trying to undo a cube on this. Now 6 cubed is 216. Again, this chart is also filled out in Schoology, so you can just use that as well. 7 cubed is 343. So then the cube root of 343 is 7. 8 cubed is 512. So the cube root of 512 is 8. 9 cubed, that one I don't usually remember that one very well. That's 729. So the cube root of 729 then is 9. Now we have a trick for cubing things with zeros, just like we did for squaring things with zeros. When I had 10 squared, I ended up with 100. It doubles the number of zeros. When I have 10 cubed, it will triple the number of zeros. So this would be 1,000, which makes sense. But then the cube root of 1,000, when I'm going the other direction, I'm going to divide the number of zeros by 3. So I would get back down to 10. Same thing happens with decimal kind of numbers. So if we had 3 decimals in a problem and we were taking the cube root, we would have 1 decimal in our answer. So when we looked at this in the last lesson, we were looking at squared shapes or just area, 2-dimensional. This is cubic shapes in terms of volume. So the volume of this shape is 343. This is a really good reason for why we just filled in that last chart. The cube root of 343, and you can see right here, is going to be 7. So that means that this would be a 7 by 7 by 7. These are all in inches cube to get me that size. For B, the cube root of 27, that would be 3. So this would be a 3 feet by 3 feet by 3 feet, because 3 times 3 times 3 is 27. And if the volume of this cube is 125, the cube root of that is 5. So that means this would be a 5 meter by 5 meter by 5 meter cube. Just like when we had fractions, I'm going to say we're not going to worry about things. When we had fractions with square roots, we're not going to worry about it with this either, because the numbers that I'm giving you are both perfect cubes. To be able to find the side length on this, we would really take the cube root of 1 over 27. Well, the cube root of 1 is just 1, and the cube root of 27 is 3. So each side is going to be 1/3 of an inch. When I just need to find cube roots, so the cube root of 8 from your chart or from your brain, that's just 2, because 2 times 2 times 2 is 8, so the cube root of 8 is going to be 2. On the last lesson, when we had a problem like this, but it had a square root, I said, oh, can't do it. Won't work. It was the square root of negative 49. Couldn't do it. However, I can take the cube root of a negative number because a negative times a negative times a negative, 3 negatives, that'll give me a negative. So that will work. When I take the cube root of just a regular 27, I get 3. So the cube root of negative 27 is going to be negative 3 because negative 3 times negative 3 times negative 3 would be negative 27. Fractions, again, the cube root of 1 for the numerator is going to be 1. The cube root is 64. Be careful on that one. Remember, I said it's 4, so it's just 1/4. And again, doing some evaluating, figuring out these numbers as we go. The cube root of 216. So we know that the cube root of just a regular 216 is 6. So the cube root of negative 216 is going to be negative 6. Sorry, my mouse is kind of over that. So I would have 2 times a negative 6 would be negative 12. And negative 12 minus 3 or plus a negative 3 is going to give me negative 15. In B, again, we said in the last lesson, you could do this, the cube root of 125. This would be 5, and then 5 to the third power. Oh, it's right back to 125. This cube and the cube root undo each other. So this is really just going to be 125 plus 21, which just gives me 146. Cube root of 1, that one's easy. Number 2, this is going to be a negative, and the cube root of 343 we know is 7, so this is going to be a negative 7. Again, this will be negative. The cube root of 27 is 3. The cube root of 1,000 is 10. So it'll be negative 3 over 10. Here, I'm going to have 18 minus 4 times, the cube root of 8 is just 2. Well, 4 times 2 is 8. So I really have 18 minus 8, which is 10. In number 5, the cube and the cube root cancel out, so I'm just going to be left with negative 64 plus a positive 43. Now, there are more negatives, so you'll have to make sure that you subtract and get a negative 21. And the cube root of 512 is 8. So I've got 5 times 8, which is going to be 40, minus 19. 40 minus 19 is 21. Sometimes I'll ask you to substitute. So if I'm saying that x is equal to 192, I'm going to put that 192 in for the x here and right there. So just doing that substitution, this is what it's going to look like. 192 divided by 4, this is going to be 48 for the first part, and I'll show you that in a second. The cube root of 192 over 3. Now, 192 is not a perfect cube. 3 is not a perfect cube. But if I would simplify that fraction, 192 divided by 3, that gives me 64 in the cube root. And the cube root of 64 is just 4. So 48 plus 4 is 52. Again, doing some substitution here, I would have the cube root of 8 times 64 plus another 64, because this y is going to go in here and right there. So 8 times 64 is 512, which is a nice number for us, because the cube root of 512 is going to be 8 plus 64 gives me 72. And in number 8, when I substitute the negative 3 in, I'm going to have 2 times the negative 3 minus the cube root of 9 times negative 3. So this will be a negative 6 minus the cube root of negative 27. We said cube roots are okay to be negative. That's going to be a negative 3. So I really have negative 6 minus negative 3. Change, we get negative 3. And for this last one, large and small answers. Again, we just want to make sure that we can practice this. If I know the volume, what I really need to do is take the cube root. By the way, notice that when I'm writing this, I'm putting that 3 in that little section right here of the radicand. It doesn't go out in front of the whole thing. Be careful with that. So the cube root of 64, we know that's just 4. And I have 3 zeros in here. I'm going to divide that by 3 and I get 1 0 in my answer. So this is going to be 40 for each side. They would be 40 feet on each one of them. And for this problem, I would have the cube root of 1 over 216. Well, the cube root of 1 is 1, and the cube root of 216 is 6. So this means that each of these sides would be, not that you can really see it right there, each of those sides would be 1/6 of a foot. Today's worksheet, finding cube roots. So a lot of that evaluating and working with perfect cubes and cube roots. The answer key is in Schoology, so make sure you check that, and then take the learning check when you're all done. Let me know if you need any help.